Do you think news like that is sort of sending the DRAM market into a panic?
But if you dig deeper into it, their actual output measured in bits didn't go up.
Because it wasn't exactly like the AI boom started late 2025, right? What really got this thing going? Welcome to Supply Chain. I'm John from Asianometry.
I'm Tim Culpin from Culpium.
You know, Tim, today something's very expensive.
Yeah. Apart from a Ferrari.
And gasoline.
And gasoline. And a Learjet, memory chips.
Memory chips. What types of memory chips?
Well, actually all types of memory chips, but DRAM, dynamic random access memory, is expensive. And so is NAND. Not and storage memory. But the big one everyone cares about, of course, is DRAM.
What is DRAM, Tim?
DRAM is a type of memory that is dynamic random access, which I won't explain in detail, but basically it's a volatile memory, which means that when you turn the power off, the information disappears inside it. But it's very fast. And so you want DRAM to be very close to the CPU, and it holds information just for a little while, often milliseconds, and feeds it into the CPU that then allows it to make calculations. So think of it as being the file on top of your desk that you need access to quickly, whereas, say, the SSD or the hard drive is the filing cabinet behind you. And the thing is, in AI, you want more and more information at your fingertips, and that is essentially what DRAM is.
Interesting. Very interesting. And right now, DRAM's a commodity, right?
It is a commodity, and if we think of commodity as being basically all products of the same type are the same, so gold is a commodity because
corn is a commodity,
and of course oil is a commodity. Potatoes are a commodity. If there's a futures contract or some derivative in it, it's probably a commodity. There is not really a futures exchange for DRAM. There kind of is, but not really. It's mostly spot market and long-term supply agreements. But the daily price is tracked by companies such as TrendForce in Taiwan. But yes, it's a commodity, which basically means all DRAM of the same spec is basically the same. There's not really any difference between one supplier's DRAM and another supplier's DRAM.
So what's going on with this price increase? When did it start, so far as you can tell?
Well, I mean, it really started kind of at the start of the AI boom, but it was very, very slow. It took off mostly in the second half of 2025. That was the real kind of kaboom moment. For example, ASP, average selling price per bit, it's usually measured per bit, in the third quarter of 2025, started rising low double digits, so 10 to 15%, quarter on quarter. Then in the fourth quarter of 2025, a bigger jump, somewhere between 20 and 40%, quarter on quarter. But then the first quarter, the March quarter of 2026, kaboom! Samsung was charging 90% more than it did 3 months prior. 90% more. SK Hynix and Micron were charging around 65% more for the same stuff that they were selling just 3 months earlier. Crazy. Absolutely crazy.
Why? What do you think caused that? Like, why is it suddenly... Because it wasn't exactly like the AI boom started late 2025, right? So, like, kind of what really got this thing going?
Why now? Yeah, I think it's a perfect storm of factors. We do know that the NVIDIA series of chips, Grace Blackwell through to Vera Rubin, which is the current incarnation coming out, that's been around for a while and it takes a lot of memory. But what we've really seen since the second half of 2025 is a lot more scale of AI chips being made, and AI chips need DRAM There is a very specific type of DRAM that goes with AI chips, which is called high bandwidth memory,
Right.
HBM. But it's not the only type of memory. Standard, old school DDR DRAM is still very important. And so companies like NVIDIA, AMD, and then the hyperscaler and cloud service providers who are doing their own white label chips, like Amazon and Google and everybody else, have all been making chips at somewhat the same time, going to mostly TSMC to get them, and they all need DRAM chips to accompany it. Mostly HBM, which is built right next to the chip through a packaging technique that TSMC dominates. But at the same time, the PC industry, including standard servers, laptops, desktops, and so forth, also need DRAM, normal old school DDR DRAM. And the major companies, Samsung, SK Hynix, and Micron, between them, don't really have enough supply to help everybody. And they have not increased supply over the last 6 months, which is a bit of a surprise to a lot of people. Because if you look at their first quarter earnings, their earnings all shot up by a lot. Their revenue all went up. But if you dig deeper into it, their revenues in DRAM went up by almost exactly the amount of the scale of the ASP rise, which means their actual output measured in bits didn't go up. And so when you have output staying the same, supply staying the same, but then you have demand increasing, well, the only result is going to be price increases because it's a commodity. And so it's been this perfect storm of factors where everybody needs it at the same time, and an NVIDIA chip is not useful without HBM. In fact, no processing chip at all, even in a smartphone, is useful without DRAM of some sort. And if you can't get the DRAM, then the product is useless. So if you think of an NVIDIA chip, which has CPU, GPUs all put together, imagine that costs $5,000. But if you can't get $500 worth of DRAM, you can't sell it. And because it has to be packaged together, you have to have that HBM available to ship to TSMC to put it on the packaging. And if you can't get it, then you can't sell your $5,000 chip. So if that means you need to pay 50% more or 100% more for that DRAM, you'll pay it, because the alternative is to not sell your very, very, very expensive AI chip. And then if you're someone like Apple or Dell or Lenovo or Xiaomi, who is selling computers and laptops and smartphones, and you also have expensive product to sell, and DRAM is a relatively small part of your overall cost, you'll pay the price because you don't have a choice. And we're seeing that, for example, in the oil market, with the war in Iran. If you can't get it, then you can't operate your airplanes or your trucks or your cars, so you'll pay whatever you have to. It's a very inelastic market. Price can go up a lot and demand really won't fall very much. And on the flip side, if demand goes up just a little bit, price can go up a lot. And that's why these DRAM prices are just escalating right now, despite not a lot of change in the overall trajectory of the AI market.
I mean, you have these news from OpenAI and all that they're building these. I pulled up this article from October that says that OpenAI is going to do some deal with SK Hynix and Samsung for like tens of thousands of wafers, right? Do you think news like that is sort of kind of like sending the DRAM market into a panic? And then they'll just buy it any allocation or something like that?
Yeah, I think so. I think everybody's competing with everybody else. There's been a lot of news stories about executives from Apple and AMD and NVIDIA and everybody else camped out in Seoul, knocking on the door of Samsung and SK Hynix, trying to get allocation, begging them for allocation, trying to send us, begging for allocation, trying to secure short, medium, and long-term supply agreements. And if you're the seller and you say, hey, I've got 1,000 chips available and you've got 3 buyers and they all need it, well, you just say to the first buyer, well, if you don't pay this price, this guy will. And, if the second guy doesn't pay that price, the third guy will. And it's a competitive advantage. because whoever gets the DRAM gets to build the chip, gets to build out their AI server infrastructure and data centers.
Or
and
smartphone.
So you'll pay it.
Smartphone, yeah.
Or smartphone, yes. Or laptop. And if you've got a product that's price sensitive, like a low-end laptop or a low-end smartphone, you're probably going to make the decision it's not worth it. You can't justify it. But if you've got a multi-million-dollar AI server to build, you're going to think it's worth it. And that's really where Samsung, SK Hynix, and Micron are sitting right now. They've got the product that everybody needs, and they know they need it. And if you're those buyers, you don't want to be missing out. So you're going to bid up. You're going to be fearful of missing out. So you're going to bid up the price, not really knowing what the next guy is willing to pay, because it's a little bit of opaque in that way. And so you'll pay whatever you have to pay, and then the next guy will come in and outbid you and pay even more. And it's just going to keep going up in price.
Why don't the companies, the suppliers, SK Hynix, Samsung, Micron, why don't they add more supply now? Why are they just taking price increases and not just saying, oh, look, we're gonna solve this crisis. We're not getting the announcements that they're opening new fabs or something like that. I guess there's a couple, they have announcements that in like New York, but that's like predates all of this price boom. So what's going on with supply then?
Well, there's the official answer that you hear from the companies, which is, it takes time, be patient, we're building our capacity. Somewhat true. They are finally in 2026 increasing their capex. They didn't really over the last few years. But the unofficial answer, the one that they probably wouldn't want to admit to, is if you can get 90% more revenue for doing nothing, or you can spend billions and billions of dollars and get maybe 100% more revenue, well, which one's got a better return? Like, you literally have to do nothing, and you can boost your revenue by 100% over the space of a year. Samsung, for example, in 3 successive quarters had a 15% price rise, followed by a 40% price rise, followed by a 90% price rise. So that's more than double in 6 months for doing nothing, for not spending any more capex than they previously were spending. That's, it's free money. Why would you bother? And then on the flip side, the memory chip industry is hugely cyclical. If you spend billions of dollars now and 4 years from now, this AI boom might peter out a little bit. It won't die, but the growth will not be as strong. You're left holding billions of dollars of capex on your balance sheet, which then flows through to your income statement. You've got overcapacity, and the flip side of having, the upside from demand outstripping supply is then suddenly supply outstrips demand and prices crash. I think they're trying to avoid the scenario 5 years from now. So if you've got the ability to get 100% more revenue today for doing basically nothing and avoid a possible crash 5 years from now, you would probably take that option versus spending billions of dollars to satisfy demand and possibly facing a bigger cost at the other end of it. Right. I think they're avoiding a future hangover.
Right. But maybe there's like one company, right? Like that's going to be like, hey, look, all these other guys, they'll sit, but we can expand, right? No? Is there an outsider? No?
Yes. Well, it's classic game theory, really. If they all sit around and nobody expands supply, then they all get to enjoy the price rise. It's almost like a version of the prisoner's dilemma. But the first time to expand supply by, say, 10% gets to have 10% more supply available to ship while enjoying the 100% higher price. So they benefit. So if the other two sit still and don't expand supply, you expand supply by 10, 20, 30%, the prices will still stay high, but you then get to enjoy selling 30% more product at that higher price. But then if someone else sees you doing that, they think, well, I better do that too. Because there's also an economies of scale of having higher supply. And then you get to this point where they all increase. And the oil market is a perfect example of this. OPEC being a literal cartel, they are always sitting around and having meetings saying, we will coordinate increases in supply or cuts in supply, and that's how they manage it. The DRAM companies, 3 of them between them have more than 90% of the DRAM market. That's this gamesmanship that they are not allowed to sit down and work out amongst themselves. That would be against the law. But that's what they can do. And the way to signal how much capacity they put online is they make announcements about future expansion. So Samsung, SK Hynix, and Micron have announced expansions. And in their quarterly investor calls, they talk about their expansion plans. And in the last round of earnings calls, they made all the right noises about expansion, and, it takes time. But at the same time, these companies were also crowing about how much money they're making and how they see supply will still not keep up with demand over the next few years, that demand will still outstrip supply, and we see a strong pricing situation for the next 2 years. So they're boasting about their inability and unwillingness to increase supply enough to meet demand. And then they just turn around and say, well, it takes time. It takes 18 months, 2 years, which is factually true. But we all saw this AI boom years ago. I saw it 4 or 5 years ago, and I wrote about it back then. I could see it coming. Smarter people than me could see it coming. But the DRAM makers decided not to invest.
That sort of behavior between all these different companies. You mentioned cartel, right?
Yeah. Another word is oligopoly.
Oligopoly. Yeah.
Well, an oligopoly is just a monopoly of a few companies rather than just one company.
Yeah.
Cartel is the naughty version of it, where they actually get together and kind of coordinate.
Mm-hmm.
It is against the law, and they all got caught a few years ago, 20 years ago, to be honest. And quite a lot of companies, it was back literally 20 years ago right now. The DRAM cartel between around 2004 to 2006, around that period of time, they all got caught by various regulators and investigators in the US and Europe, and they had formed a kind of a price-fixing regime, and they all got fined. Samsung, I think, copped the biggest fine of around $300 million. Hynix, it was not yet called SK Hynix, it was just Hynix, was around $185 million, so close to $500 million for the Koreans. Infineon, the German company, which was still in the business back then, about $160 million, thereabouts. Elpida, which, rest in peace, no longer exists, in its current form at least, the Japanese company was also caught up in that and fined around $80 to $90 million. So they all caught big fines, and there were substantial fines, but the upside from cartel behavior probably outweighed the fines that they copped. There was one company that didn't get fined.
I wonder which one. There was a missing name.
There is a missing name. So the three biggest DRAM companies are Samsung, SK Hynix, and Micron. And Micron did not get fined because they were the whistleblower.
Really?
They were the whistleblowers back then. Now, some people within the company were individually caught up in it, and I think they pled guilty or got found guilty for, obstruction of justice, those kind of things. But the company itself got off because they were the whistleblower in this. They were the ones who came in and basically broke the cartel that they were kind of a part of. So, yeah, Micron got away with it. I believe they were involved in cartel behavior, but because they were the ones who dobbed on everybody else, they were not fined. Now, I think it would be a stretch for me to make the allegation that there is cartel behavior today. I think they would be extremely stupid to engage in cartel behavior. But when there's only 3 companies, you almost don't need to engage in cartel behavior because you can just signal publicly through investor conferences and press releases and forums and so forth what your plans are. And you don't have to sit down and agree that, I won't expand if you don't expand. If you just say, this is what I'm planning to do, and others can kind of follow along. So it's it's kind of like a tacit cartel behavior without actually being a coordinated cartel behavior.
What about so what do you think of is coming in the future? Do you think that these price rises are gonna stay, or do you think it's like a temporary sort of kind of like almost like a short squeeze kind of thing?
I think the prices will stay up through the end of 2027. There may be some dips from time to time. I think we'll also see more long-term supply agreements, which kind of blunts the price rises because more and more buyers are just getting it from long-term supply agreements, and therefore the spot market is less important. And what we may see is that in the spot market, the prices may rise, but that won't matter so much because less of the actual transaction and supply and demand or the purchasing is actually through the spot market. It will be more through kind of like a futures market, not quite, but essentially like a futures market with long-term supply agreements. I think what will be key to those long-term supply agreements is how the pricing is structured. It may be at an absolute set price, or it may be at some kind of discount to the long-term spot price, or something in between, or a cost plus kind of arrangement. So the devil would definitely be in the details. And I think with HBM especially, because HBM is very specific, it doesn't get packaged separately like DRAM does. It literally just goes from, the fabs in Korea or Texas or wherever and gets sent essentially to Taiwan for packaging through the CoWoS process. More of that will have to be through long-term supply agreements. And then we may see from the companies like HP, Dell, Lenovo needing to get into long-term supply agreements for DRAM because you can't easily swap between HBM and DRAM. They're still both flavors of DRAM, but one is, DDR DRAM used for computers and servers and stuff, and the other is packaged DRAM. That's called HBM. So I think, to answer your question, I think the prices will stay high, but I think it will not rise 100% a year like we've seen recently. I think it'll stabilize. But I do also think that if there is some external shock over the next 12 to 18 months that causes the whole AI thing to suddenly slow down, I think the DRAM prices could fall apart very quickly if there's some external shock that causes the overall demand for DRAM infrastructure to slow down or drop.
Very nice, very nice. Anything else we should bring up about the DRAM boom?
I would say,
should I start making DRAM wafers today in my backyard?
I think you should, yes. I absolutely think that everybody should go out and set up their own little cottage DRAM industry. I would say the other thing to look at is NAND. I think people have not really looked at NAND. NAND prices have risen, but I think that as we have more AI creating videos of kittens playing violins and so forth, there will be more content to store. And people are very bad at deleting their content. Just anyone pick up your phone and look at how many photos you've never looked at and still fill up your storage on your phone. People do not delete their content. And so the demand for SSD, which is basically made from NAND, will continue to escalate. And so I think long-term NAND prices will still rise.
All right. You've been listening to Supply Chain. I'm John from Asianometry.
I'm Tim from Colpium.
Have a great day.